Hey, my gardening friends, I hope you're doing well. I wanted to talk with you today about seed starting and most specifically, when do we start our seeds? Sometimes that can be kind of tricky, but if you know a couple of key pieces of information, that will help you greatly in when to start your seeds. One of the key things that we really need to know when starting seeds is what is my growing zone? In order to find out your growing zone, you can do a quick internet search. If you live in the United States, you can internet search what is my growing zone and put in your zip code. And the USDA has made a beautiful map telling all of the different growing zones across the country. If you live outside of the US, there is a way to convert the USDA growing zone map into your area. I found a website and I'll show it to you here. This is gardeningnowhow.com, and that tells you how to convert your growing zone if you're outside of the US. So that's a really nice tool to have. Let me show it to you one more time. And it's gardeningnowhow.com. I will put that in the description below. So that's our first key, knowing our growing zone. My growing zone is zone 6B. So in my zone 6B, I know that my last frost date is usually around April 23rd, somewhere between April 23rd and the end of April. So anything that is cold hardy, I can actually put into my garden before that April 23rd or the end of April date. Anything that is tender, like frost tender, I need to wait till after that date. So usually around the 1st of May for me on my tender annuals. Another really good resource in knowing when to start your seed is the actual seed packet itself. And if you are fortunate enough to buy from a company that puts the winter hardy zone on the back of the seed packet or information like that on the back of the seed packet, oh, that is so helpful. For instance, the Gardener's Workshop, and I get a lot of seeds from them, and they do not sell outside of the U.S. at this point, but hopefully someday they will for you folks outside of the U.S. They give a lot of information on the back of their seed packet. For instance, Sweet William. I'm going to be planting and sowing some Sweet William seeds here really soon. And Sweet William is winter hardy in zones 5 and south. It says right on the back of the seed packet. So that's a really key piece of information for me because actually I should have started my Sweet William in the autumn time, about 8 weeks before I wanted to plant it out and let it just as little starts be planted out in my garden and let it winter over because Sweet William is hardy in my area. Another good example is Rudbeckia. The type of Rudbeckia that I'm growing for cut flowers, I use it as an annual, and it is winter hardy in zones 5 and south. So I did plant some Rudbeckia that I started about 8 weeks before my first frost date, which is usually around October 23rd. So I have those two dates in my mind, April 23rd being my last frost date, October 23rd being my first frost date, sometimes a little bit later, sometimes a little bit earlier, just depending on the weather patterns. But the Rudbeckia, because I know it is winter hardy in zones 5 and south, that it is a fall planted, I would start that indoors 6 to 8 weeks. 8 weeks is the best before I want to plant it out in my garden, give it a little time, a couple weeks to root in before that first frost hits. So let's take a zinnia, for example. We know that a zinnia is a warm season tender annual. So knowing your last frost date is so vital if you want to start some zinnia seeds and you want to plant them out, or if you want to direct sow your zinnia seeds in your garden. You would not want to direct sow those or even plant out your little seedlings if there's any danger of frost on the weather forecast. You want to make sure that all of that is passed. So knowing these couple of key pieces of information is really vital to us as growers. Whether you're a home gardener, whether you grow in a more commercial setting, whether you grow for in between, like I am, a kind of in between a home gardener and a commercial gardener, these pieces of information, when is my last frost date and what growing zone am I in, really determines whether I have success in my seed starting or not. So what happens when you have a seed packet that doesn't have the winter hardiness zone of that particular plant that you're planting? A lot of seed packets will have quite a bit of information, and that's going to be another good resource for when to start seeds or when to direct sow outside. These are carrots, and these are by botanical interest. Now we all know that carrots like a little bit cooler temperatures to do their best. So this says it's recommended to sow the seeds directly into your garden 2 to 4 weeks before your average last frost date. So my average last frost date again is April 23rd, so 2 to 4 weeks before, maybe the end of March, I could actually sow carrots into my garden and have good success. Stock is another cool season hardy annual, and the seed packet tells me it's winter hardy in zone 8 and south. So what that tells me is I cannot plant this in the autumn time like I can the Sweet William and the Rudbeckia and some of my other autumn sowed and autumn planted transplants in my garden. I have to wait until very early spring. So I'm going to start my stock around the 1st of February, which is in just a couple of days. And I can plant this out in my garden around maybe the 1st or 2nd week of March and just watch the weather and see what it does. I may have to cover it a little bit, but it is can take a little light frost. So your cool season hardy annuals can take a little bit of frost in some cases. So knowing the winter hardiness zone of a plant that I'm planting out, or I'm starting from seed and then I want to transplant it out, is such a key piece of information for having success in your garden. If the back of that seed packet doesn't give you that information, then a quick internet search of the plant that you want to grow and you want to start from seed should tell you what zone that plant is hardy to. Of course, not all plants grown from seed do well in all climates. Now, we're not talking about shrubs. We're talking about whether they be annuals or perennials that you're growing from seed. So knowing these pieces of information, one, what your growing zone is, and two, what the hardiness zone of that plant that you're starting from seed, so important. I hope this information has been helpful to you. It's really been helpful to me to know these couple of key pieces of information, and that just helps me wrap my head around when I need to start certain seeds. Thanks so much for joining me, and until next time, happy seed starting and happy gardening. Bye-bye, friends.